Welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. This evening I will shortly be joined by Louise from Pawsitive Fitness Ireland, and we're going to cover the topic of Sleddog Sports. Really looking forward to this one. As many of you will know, we've been doing these what's going on in Ireland in the dog community. So it's really great to have a new and very different topic. So I see Louise has joined the chat, and I think you're here, Louise.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thanks
and
for having me.
No problem at all. And would you do me the pleasure of introducing yourself, please?
Okay. So my name is Louise, and as you can see on the tin, I run Pawsitive Fitness Ireland, which is basically a business, and the kind of aspect is getting people out and getting people fit and doing different sports with their dogs and kind of general canine health and fitness based. So it's something that I set up in 2018 because I've been kind of competing in Sleddog Sports for years, since 2009, and I just love the sport so much that, you know, competing in it just seemed natural that I wanted to kind of share it with people, and it was something that kind of, you know, was my passion, and I'm hoping that hopefully I can get a few new people to join in the sport along the way and share the passion with everyone. So
definitely,
that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Thank you, and I think there's lots of people that are really interested in this evening's topic. So just as a brief introduction from myself as well, in case anyone doesn't know me, I'm Killian from Ruby Reese. We set up Ruby Reese just over a year ago because of our own dog, Ruby, who's a French bulldog. She has a sensitive tummy, sensitive skin, and we decided that we wanted to bring out products that are top quality for dogs and for dog owners or dogs humans just like us. So let's jump straight into the topic, and I'll ask the basic question first anyway. Okay. What are Sleddog Sports and where did they come from?
Okay, so I suppose when people hear Sleddog Sports, they think of movies like 8 Below and all that, where you see the big husky teams pulling sleds in the snow. So the sport would have originated from that originally. Now, obviously in Ireland, we don't have snow very often, unless you're lucky enough to live somewhere that gets snow for a week, once a year, and that's it. So generally when we say Sleddog Sports, we talk about different variations on that, you know, so they would have originated with the whole sled dog on the snow thing, but they've had to kind of adapt that to make it more suitable for Irish weather and places that don't get snow. So hopefully, you know, we kind of get into the different variations on the sports. But, you know, it's very dependent, and the sports all kind of depend on your dogs. So if you have 6 huskies, of course, you're going to kind of originate towards the sled dog aspect of it, and, you know, maybe I'll run them like you would see them if they were on the snow, right down to having one dog and running with, you know, a pug. Yeah. Okay. You know, so hopefully we can kind of get into it, and I'll be able to elaborate a little bit more and pique people's interests.
Yeah, maybe let's I suppose first and foremost, there's 3, or there's a couple of different types. So you've mentioned kind of sled sports. I think ski dog sports is another term that goes around, and dry land.
Yeah. So I suppose the one that people tend to think of would be the big team. So if you have 6 huskies, generally what you would have is what's called a rig. So it could be a 3-wheel. I mean, it's almost like, you know, those kids, are they called flickers or something like that? You know, with the 3-wheel, the scooters. Yeah. It would be a more elaborate version of that with better brakes, obviously. And you would have bigger teams, and they would all be hooked up to it, you know, so you could have 2 dogs if you were running a 6-dog team. They would be attached to this rig and they would pull it, you know, and you use your voice to kind of guide the dogs, because obviously you have to tell them where they're going, or, you know, if you're going through a forest, bang, tree, there you go, that's not what you want. But that would be kind of the most kind of obvious crossover from the sled dog sports that you'd see on the snow. And this is not a lot of people.
Sorry. This just for my own, because I'm not an expert in this area in any means. So this is a done on dry land. This rig has got wheels.
Yeah, so it would be a wheeled rig. It would have either 3 or 4 wheels, depending on the brand, because there are different variations. And and the human would stand on it and hold the handlebars with the very, very good brakes. And the dogs would all be attached to the front of it, and they would pull as a team and work together as a team, like what you would see on the snow, because obviously we don't have snow. Generally, when you're doing any of these sports, they will be done on a softer trail. We wouldn't really run them on tarmac and stuff like that. Just from a joint perspective, it's not ideal. There's no scientific proof to say that running them on tarmac and stuff like that is bad, but anecdotal evidence. And if you have anybody who runs on tarmac, you'll often find, like marathon runners, once they get to 50 or 60, a lot of the time their knees and their cartilage and stuff starts going. So the kind of anecdotal evidence would suggest that the same thing would be applicable to dogs as well, so we tend to run on softer trails, forest trails usually, because you get a good you get some good interesting trails that will be twisty turny, and it all kinds of adds to the fun aspect of the sport.
Okay, so I'm thinking forest trails as opposed, like, it's not going to be sandy beaches because you're going to be slipping and sliding probably.
You can as well, and actually some people will train on sand because it makes the dogs work that bit harder, because if you're looking at soft sand, the dogs really have to kind of dig their feet right in to pull. So a lot of people, when they're doing strength training and stuff with their dogs, would often run on sand, and you can. It's just that if you have an expensive rig that's worth a lot of money, as the professionals would, the sand and all can often be abrasive to the equipment. So some people would shy away from that, but beach is good because it's not as dangerous. If you're thinking of a twisty turny forest trail where sand is quite flat, and it's there isn't really anywhere you can crash unless the dogs all decide that they want to go for a swim. But other than that, sand is fine. Anything soft is okay for the dogs.
Okay, good. Okay, so we have an idea of where this sport will be going in Ireland. It's probably going to be interesting forest trails, twists and turns, kind of manoeuvring, kind of around obstacles and bends and things like that.
Yeah, well, you would hope they would manoeuvre around them rather than going over them, but it adds to the fun.
Okay, so how do you want to approach the different sport? Because it's a huge category, really, isn't it? I suppose. Do we want to mention maybe just briefly mention the ones that are actually done on snow, so that people have an idea, and then maybe we just move completely into the dry land ones after that? Because,
to be honest, here in Ireland we don't have a lot of stuff on snow, because obviously you can't rely on the weather. Now there are a couple of international federations that would have world championships and stuff on the snow. So one would be the International Federation of Sleddog Sports, and they do a world championships on snow, and I haven't been to the snow championships yet. I'd say it's amazing to watch, but you'll get a lot of people, mostly kind of the European people, from the European countries that would have a lot of snow, whereas Ireland, you don't really have much of a chance to actually train on snow. So what some people have done, I know from the UK, some of the teams that have they've kind of gone over to the to the likes of Austria and stuff like that, brought their dogs over and done their training on the snow, and they've gone on to compete on the snow. But obviously we don't. I think we sent somebody going back probably about 10 or 11 years. I think we sent one team to the World Championships on snow. So it was probably a bit like Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsled team. I'd say it was probably a bit like that, but I'd say it's an amazing experience, and it's something that I would love to do, but I have to get more dogs first.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. It's a big commitment, especially when you can't. But so another thing
that you can do, and it's a little bit more user friendly than having the big teams on the sled, is you can do something called ski jouring, which the word jouring tends to mean dog assisted. So ski jouring would be skiing being pulled by dogs, essentially. So you'd be wearing a specific belt, and the dogs would be attached to the belt, and they would pull. You wouldn't have any more than 2 dogs, because you're never going to be able to stop if you have more than 2 dogs pulling you, unless they're chihuahuas or something like that. But ski jouring, you would be wearing a belt, and the dogs would be attached to the belt, and they would be essentially pulling you, and you're assisting them skiing. So that's interesting. I don't know whether my coordination would be good enough for that or not. I've never skied before, so I don't know. But that's a little bit more kind of user friendly, rather than having the big, having to have 4 or 6 dogs. If you have 1 or 2, you can do ski jouring instead.
Okay, so there's a lot of sled stuff. There's the ski jouring, which sounds like something out of James Bond, and then Is that kind of, that's most...
That's really it for the snow, yeah. Yeah, I think the dry land kind of, it originated from that sport, and originally when it was kind of established, it was a way to work the dogs without the snow, because obviously if you're running a big race like the Iditarod, which would be the kind of biggest sled dog race in the world, you need your dogs to be really, really super fit, and you need to train them on the seasons even when there aren't snow. So the dry land aspect originated from that, and they kind of changed it. So instead of having a sled with skis on the end of it, they made a rig with wheels on it to make it user friendly, so that you could train your dogs all year round. And that's where the dry land aspect has originated, and it's made it more user friendly for the likes of us in Ireland and the UK, who maybe don't get snow, but we can still do the sport.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for introducing all of that. Now the dry land ones. This is where the real interest comes in, because it's much more accessible, I'm sure.
Well, this is my passion, because I know it and I love it, and so you might not be able to shut me up.
well, let's briefly touch on what's available. I've heard terms like Canicross, Dogjouring, scooters, and I actually had rigs written down here in my notes as well for dry land. So you've mentioned those.
I've mentioned the rigs. So I suppose the next one down would be scooter, and that's probably my favourite out of all of them. With scooter, you tend to run 1 or 2 dogs. And again, you have a scooter that, it's kind of like a child scooter, but it's way more advanced. It would have a lot of kind of mountain bike fixtures, I suppose. It would have the bigger wheels. They'd be made for terrain, cross-country terrain and stuff like that. And obviously you would need really good brakes. And the dogs are attached to the front of it, and they pull like they would the sled.
Okay, so this is
and the human then
courage kind of situation.
Yeah, so the human then, if you really enjoy the sport and you really kind of get passionate about it, you tend not to just stand on the scooter. You don't want the dogs to be doing all the work. It is a dog-assisted sport, so it's you and the dogs working together as a team.
Okay.
Whereas with the rig, you're kind of, especially if you have a big team, you're going too fast that you actually couldn't really help. If you tried to put your foot on the ground, you probably end up losing your foot. Whereas the scooter, you're kicking, and you're kind of changing feet and you're kicking the whole time, so that you're giving the dogs that push and they're not getting fatigued by having to do all the work.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So scooter is my passion, and I've run the 2. I have 2 pointer crosses, and I've run the 2 girls, and we've competed abroad and stuff like that. And it's amazing, just that adrenaline buzz that you get when you're going through a forest at 50 kilometers an hour with trees and the wind and everything else. It really is an adrenaline fueled buzz.
Yeah, the videos that you post, and I know we've been following each other for quite a while. The videos that you post are just amazing. Like it's the right kind of madness.
Yeah. And it's a great way of exercising dogs that are high energy but maybe can't be let off the lead. So if you look at dogs like pointers, who would be very prey driven, or even huskies that, again, they'd be very prey driven dogs, and you might not be able to let them off the lead, but they are high energy dogs and they're made to work and to run. It's a great way of giving them an appropriate outlet for the energy. Especially if you consider what the likes of huskies were bred for. They were bred to do this sport. And so many people get them. And I mean, that's how I got into the sport. I got a husky 13 years ago, and I wanted to do what she was bred to do. Because you see so many dogs that, like huskies, that are bred to do this, and people just get them because they look nice and they do nothing with them. And then they wonder why all these dogs have behaviour problems.
That's a very good point, and it's I think these breeds keep coming up the more you talk to the Irish community. That a lot of people have been misinformed, and like you say, they don't think about the behaviour or the typical behaviour of the breed. They think more about how the dog looks, or how it'll look on Instagram, or how it'll look in the family photos or whatever.
Especially the huskies that have like the blue eyes and they're really striking and they're so appealing, and they have the mask and all. People look at that and they see the Disney ones on the movies, and they just think, oh, that's so cute, and they don't realize how much work can actually be involved, and people don't consider what they're actually supposed to be doing.
Of course, absolutely. We'll get back to breeds. I'd love to get down to breeds, but let's keep going with the other types of the sport so we can get an overview. There's bike touring as well, which is different to scootering.
So bike Dogjouring would be kind of a similar thing to scooter, but you'd be on like a mountain bike.
Yeah.
Generally, mountain bikes would be used because they would have the suitable frame and the suitable tires. Again, the dogs would be attached to the front. So the dogs are attached to the bike, the rig, or the scooter by a bungee lead. So it acts like a shock absorber, so that when the dogs are pulling, it's taking some of that pull so that they're not getting jarred around every time they pull. They would also wear a suitable harness, which would be a Y-shaped harness to allow them to pull, and it sits on their sternum so that you're not interfering with windpipe, and it's not it's not interfering with their legs when they're running.
Yeah, they have the full mobility then. Yeah.
Yeah. So bike joring, again, rather than just sitting on the bike, the human would be pedaling as well to give the dogs that little boost. Generally, bike joring would have one dog, but there are some, in the UK, there are a few clubs that would allow 2-dog bike joring. But I tend to just do 2-dog scooter because it's a bit easier to dismount off the scooter if you're going to if you're going to fall. It's a little bit easier to just step off the scooter than swing the leg over the bike. But again, you would hit similar speeds of maybe 40, 50 kilometers an hour on the bike, depending on the dog and how much the human is helping them.
Okay, yeah. And would it be fair to say the bike joring gives you the most possibility for human participation? Let's say if you wanted to really, really participate as much as you could from the human side, or is that?
I suppose it would be more user friendly than the scooter because pretty much everyone has a bike as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like some people, when they start out with bike joring, they just start off with, whatever bike they have in the shed. And then as they get into it more, they'll maybe go onto adverts and get like a secondhand mountain bike and stuff like that. And especially starting out, because you do have little knocks and all that, so you're better off. It's like when you start driving, you're not going to start driving in a brand new Porsche.
Yeah.
You start off with something that you don't mind, gets a few dings and all that. And it would be the same. But in terms of bike joring, I think rather than scooter, because you have to go and buy the scooter and they're not that easy to come by and they're not particularly cheap. Whereas bike, everybody has a bike, even if you take the kids' bike out,
Okay. Yeah. Got it. And then Canicross is probably the most accessible and maybe seen around, at least in my local area. What I would see of these, I don't think I've actively seen any of the others mentioned, particularly the snow. But Canicross you see quite a bit.
See a few people, It's a sport that's definitely growing, and I suppose out of all of the different variations on the sport, it's the one that would be the easiest for anybody to do, and it's probably the most user friendly in terms of dogs as well.
Yeah,
because as long as your dog is fit and healthy, any dog can do it. I mean, I've a friend who's done it with her Chihuahua. You know what I mean? So it doesn't really matter on the size of the dog. It's, the dogs don't realize that they're tiny and they'll just pull as much as the big dog. So with Canicross, you're wearing a belt and the dog will be attached to the belt. And again, it will be the same aspect. Ideally, the dog will be out in front and they're pulling you and you're kind of running across the cross-country trails and working together as a team. I suppose with Canicross, the human has to work a lot harder with the Canicross because you have to try and keep up with the dog. Yeah. We often say with Canicross, the human is the anchor because the dogs can run. You know what I mean? It's down to how fast the human can run. Sure. So if you're, Usain Bolt or whatever, you're gonna make great times with no matter what dog you run with. Whereas if you're like me and you're kind of a slow plodder, you're never going to be that fast no matter what dog you run with because you can't move that fast. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if I guess it comes down to personal preference as well. I have a bit of a dodgy knee and it's not going to do very well over long distance running, whereas cycling is not a problem for me personally. It's definitely the one that I choose out of the two, and I'm sure scootering will be
probably the same with your knee.
Yeah,
it's hit and miss. Yeah, but a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, I hate running," so they want to get into bike just for the the aspect of the fact that either they're injured or they hate running, and it's fine. But the running would kind of be the one that most people tend to start off doing.
Yeah,
and then they'll progress, and as they kind of get bitten by the bug, they want to go faster. And they watch, they see all these teams that are like flying across the finish line and all that, and they see the videos and they go, right, I want to get into that. So they tend to progress then onto bike, and then they get 2 dogs, so they go to scooter, and then they get 4 dogs, so they do rig, so it kind of, it can be addictive.
Yeah, I can imagine that. All right.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned quite a lot about, the starting off, that there's different. I suppose the breeds are probably the best actually place to begin,
Right.
because although Chihuahuas and my friend, she can run distances,
Yeah.
it could end up being a fairly short race with
Yeah.
some dogs. So are there dogs that are better suited? Are there better dogs suited to some of these sports than others? I can't imagine a rig full of Frenchies running past me down some
You know, it might happen. That can be your goal now. I suppose in terms of the most popular breeds, you're looking at your high energy dogs. So you have the likes of collies, you have huskies, pointers. If you look at a lot of the kind of world champion level dogs, they've, I suppose, invented, it probably sounds really, really bad, but they have a breed that they've bred specifically for the sports. So if you want to be kind of top of the game, they have two different breeds. One is called a gracer, so it's a greyhound pointer. So you would have the speed of the greyhound, but they wouldn't have a lot of stamina because they're bred to run short distances. But you would have the stamina of the pointer, who would be made to hunt all day. So you're getting the best of both of those breeds. You also have what's called a Scandinavian hound. I have one of those, and they're a husky pointer greyhound. So again, you would have the speed of the greyhound, but you'd have the stamina of the other two breeds. So they would be the ones that tend to kind of win, especially on bike and scooter and even rig. They would be kind of the elite athletes, whereas with Canicross, like I said earlier, kind of any dog can do it because it's generally the human that's the slowest member of the team. Yeah. A lot of races will have a 3K option and a 5K, kind of 6K option. So, if you have a younger dog or you're starting out, or like you said, even with your pugs, if you feel that maybe, 5K is too much, you can go and you can do your 3K. So we always try and accommodate as many different dogs as we can. Because I have short, stumpy legs. I know how long running 5K with short, stumpy legs is. So the smaller breeds often appreciate the shorter distances as well.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. And it sounds very, very accessible. But how do you even go about training a dog for this? It's, I suppose dogs, they inherently know how to run, but most of the dogs that I know run in the sense that they do zoomies and that's it. So how do you go about telling the dog, okay, this is what you do?
I suppose there are different ways of doing it. I run classes, and there are a couple of kind of people all over Ireland that, they might have little running groups and stuff like that. And that's a great way to get started, just to kind of learn the basics, I suppose. When you're controlling your dog, when you're doing Canicross or bike or scooter, it's your voice that controls the dog. So you tell your dog left, right, go faster, slow down. And they're all aspects that you kind of work on and you learn. A lot of people, when they get younger dogs, they'll start teaching them the commands even before they're ever pulling in harness. They'll start teaching them left, right, go slow, go fast. And the more you kind of train it with your dog. So what I tend to recommend to people is, when you're on your walk, if you're coming up to a turn and you want to teach them left, just say left, take the turn, keep going. Say right, take the turn, keep going. And the more you do it, as with any aspect of dog training, the more consistent you are, the quicker the dog will learn it.
Okay.
So it's kind of, if you can meet with a group and you can learn all that, your dog will pick it up a lot quicker. Another way to kind of teach the dog to not do zoomies and have them in worker mode is to have the specific harness, like I was talking about earlier, so that your dog learns that when they get that harness on, they're working. And you only ever wear that harness when they're allowed to pull, because you spend so much time teaching your dog to walk to heel that some dogs will actually find it quite hard to realize that they're actually allowed to pull. Mm-hmm. So by having this specific harness on, you have your belt on, or your bike or whatever, you have your bungee lead, so your dog knows that when they see all this equipment and they have this harness on, they're allowed to pull. And you find a lot of dogs will switch into working mode. And even dogs like the pointers that will be quite prey driven, a lot of the time they'll actually, we train in the Phoenix Park from deer, and the dogs don't, if I'm walking them, they're like, oh dear, yeah. But when they're working, they tend to focus, and they don't care what's going on around them, and they just know instinctively that they're working.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's like all of the topics that we speak about on here to do with dogs. I mean, it's the repetition, the positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Dogs are a lot more intelligent than most people give them credit for. So that's totally normal. And
I suppose, even talking from a positive reinforcement, because obviously if your dog is out in front and they're pulling, a lot of the time just allowing your dog to run is reinforcement enough. So you don't really have to worry about getting the treat to them all the time. Yeah. You know what I mean? Most dogs love to run. And actually, especially if you have a dog that's so highly trained that they don't pull, being allowed to run and pull is reinforcement enough for a lot of dogs.
Definitely, yeah. And I suppose that for the team dogs then, would they be trained individually to do what they do to pull, basically, on their own first, or do they join kind of as the apprentice on a already trained team? Like what's the thoughts there?
It kind of varies. I know a lot of the bigger teams would have, once the pup, I call them a pup, but they wouldn't be running young pups, but once a pup is old enough, they'll often be hooked up. Or sometimes what they do is they'll allow them to run off the lead alongside the team so that they're watching everything and they're kind of absorbing everything. And then when they're a little bit older, they'll get hooked up and they get that feeling. Then I know with my Euro hound, when she was young, I mean, I never had to train her to pull because that's all she ever wanted to do. But I paired her up with an older, more experienced dog so that she knew how to pull instinctively, but it was everything else so that she learned, we're hooked up to the bike, the scooter. This is what we do. Yeah. So a lot of people would kind of hook them up to a more experienced dog and just allow them to take everything in.
Yeah.
And you'll often find that the more experienced dog will teach them more than the human ever will anyway.
Oh, totally. And dogs are very visual anyway. I mean, even when you're training your dog to sit, they'll usually do it to a hand gesture that you do before they'll do it to a word. So it makes a lot of sense that they kind of see something and they want to do it themselves. And would you say that Ireland has a big community involved in these sports? Is it growing? How do you see it?
It is growing. It's grown slowly, I think, and it's especially over the last few years with podcasts and stuff coming out, I think people are kind of picking up on it more. And especially with Canicross, because again, you get people, especially over lockdown, people were getting out, what can I do with my dog? Oh, I'll go for a run. So they'd run, they'd have a handheld lead and, I'd see them and I'd chase them down with a card going, hold on, here you go, there's a sport you can do quick. So I think, over the last few years, especially with social media, people are seeing more videos and more, photos and stuff like that. So it is growing. It's slowly grown. Like I said, I got into sport in 2009, so I've been 14 years doing it. And yeah, it's definitely grown. I mean, originally when I started, when we went to race events, you might have 20 people, whereas now you could have 70 odd on a good day.
So it's
now in the UK, it's even more than that. They'd have hundreds, but obviously with Ireland being such a small country, but it is grown.
Yeah,
which is great.
And is there quite an international community as well? With continental Europe and the UK, like you mentioned. I've heard things about travelling to competitions and things. So is this kind of like the equestrian world? Is there an international aspect to it as well?
Definitely. I know from my own experience, we've been lucky enough to compete as Team Ireland in World Championships over the years, and we've gone to places that I never would have gone otherwise. I've been to Italy, Czech Republic, Belgium, France, Scotland, UK, gone to Germany now this year as well. We kind of travel and it's great because you find that, the sport is so big in Europe and even in the UK that, there's always an event that you can go to.
Yeah.
So even if there's no races in Ireland at the moment, there'll be something somewhere where it's cooler and it's cool enough to run the dogs. And you find that the more events that you go to, you get to know people. So you'll actually make friends from all other countries because you get to see them at different events, or they might travel over here or you travel, and it's very much a community, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Brilliant. So concretely, for the people that might be inspired from our talk, what would be the first step that they could take? I mean, if they're able to run, should they be looking at Canicross? If they're more interested in the biking side of things, beg, borrow, or steal a mountain bike, and maybe get down to a class in the Phoenix Park?
Yeah, I suppose the main place is to kind of get more information. And we have a club in Ireland called Canicross Ireland. And we now for the summer we don't have any races, and we tend not to kind of meet too much for runs because it's just very warm, and you don't want the dog to overheat or get heat stroke or anything like that. So Canicross Ireland, we would have races from kind of October to March, and they're very user friendly. We're very open to having beginners come along. So even if you're thinking about it and you just want to come along to the first one and just see what's involved and just have a look, have a chat with people, because once you go to an event, you can't shut them up. You know what I mean? Talk to a few people there, have a look at their dogs, have a chat. I mean, people are always happy to talk about the sport, and then you have the likes of myself who, I sell all the equipment, and I'm always on hand to offer advice. And obviously I have classes and we do workshops and stuff all around Ireland as well. So I think look up to see if there's any groups in your area, because I've done a couple of workshops around Ireland. So there are a few little kind of pockets of people who would kind of know the sport around Ireland. So it's a good idea, even just to, to drop me a message and say, look, I'm in such and such a county. Do you know of anyone? And I'm always happy to send you on to people, because like I said, it's about growing the sport, and you want people to get into it,
That's it. And even for, I suppose, even from my side, I've been doing a little bit of research before doing this talk, and the videos that are out there, I think it's so visually pleasing just to watch all of these different things.
Those videos that I put up are great. They always get the most likes, are the ones where I fall. People love those.
Yeah, well, I suppose at least they show it. They show that there's a reality to it as well. You'll have the rainy days, you'll have the fall days as well. Yeah,
you just brush yourself up and continue on. Yeah, you bounce. You learn how to bounce well.
That's it. It. Very good. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I know it was a huge topic to take on, but we scratched the surface just about.
Well, hopefully we piqued enough interest that people will kind of look and want to find out more information. So
Exactly. And I think a brilliant place to begin is Louise's Instagram page. That's Pawsitive Fitness Ireland with a PAW positive. And I suppose I look forward to dreaming up my dream rig. If anyone has Chihuahuas, Frenchies, and Pugs, that
we'll have to have a mini dog rig. Yeah,
I'd like.
We'll get you out eventually.
Can you do them with 10 or 12?
Yeah,
you can keep adding up.
I'm sure we could. Yeah, because their combined weight would still be small anyway. So yeah.
Very good. Okay, perfect. Thank you very, very much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Killian. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.